Iowa House Republicans have approved a bill purporting to protect religious freedom, which opponents argue is a veiled attempt to legalize discrimination against LGBTQ people. The proposed Religious Freedom Restoration Act, if signed into law, would grant individuals and entities broad exemptions based on religious beliefs, potentially allowing discrimination in various areas such as healthcare, weddings, and other services. Critics assert that the legislation distorts the concept of religious freedom to justify discriminatory practices, raising concerns about its impact on civil rights and equality in Iowa. The contentious nature of the legislation passed along party lines underscores the deep divide on issues of religious freedom, equality, and the role of government in safeguarding individual rights. It appears that these Republican legislators, like others around the country, and our Supreme Court over the last few years, are giving preference to religious beliefs over actual human beings' rights. Is this pushing toward theocracy? Only time will tell. The story is from Iowa Public Radio at Katrina Solestik on March 1st, 2024. On to Jason. What do you got?
Oh, thanks. Look, I mean, I feel like there's just been so many stories about treasonous traitors who are liars and bigots trying to usurp what we're trying to do as Americans, right? Listen to this quote in the article. This fucking person said this, quote, "The right of religious freedom," rights, okay, a thing. The rights of religious freedom is endowed upon us by our creator, not government. Our founders recognized this principle, which is fucking bullshit. And today, the Iowa House took a step forward to protect it. 23 states around the country, with both Republican and Democrat governors, have passed similar laws. Now it's Iowa's turn. Now, Connie Ryan, the executive director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, said the bill actually inserts discrimination in the state law. What Connie said is religious freedom is one of our country's most fundamental rights. Religious freedom is already protected. There is no rationale for legislation that misuses religious freedom as a means to justify discrimination against others. Now, look, like I said, this is treasonous and traitorous. These fucking people have become so emboldened ever since Trump ran for office and got elected. It's anyone who thinks religiosity is losing power in our country or world in general really isn't paying attention. These people are fucking traitors. These people who want to deny literal tax-paying citizens the same opportunities, right, access, and freedoms as other tax-paying citizens. It's based on shit that isn't even legal or constitutional. I mean, it's so hard sometimes to even be a humanist with these types of humans running around. Or honestly, maybe it even makes it more of an imperative that we be humanists, because we need to make our voices heard and fight against these liars and charlatans and thieves who are trying to rob Americans of their true rights and freedoms. These are literal government representatives who are shamelessly and openly stating that church and state are inseparable. That is disgusting and terrifying to me, and it directly affects queer people like myself, like my kid, like other people on the panel. This directly affects everybody here who's an atheist. This directly affects anybody who is can get pregnant. I mean, this directly affects poor people, especially because a lot of these things that they legislate against are issues that the working class and the poor have to deal with. These are things like having healthcare, access to abortion rights, access to rights that pregnant people need. These are things that affect people who live on, at, or below the poverty line. And that's what people don't understand, is that they're voting against their own fucking rights. Scott, I'm just going to go ahead and throw it back to you, man.
No, that's I agree totally. You mentioned this quote by the Governor Kim Reynolds. The right of the religious freedom is endowed upon us by our creator, not our government. She made a big point to say that, not the government. It's not the government, it's our creator, right? Yeah, disgusting. That was a funny thing for her to say, though, for two reasons. One, that's a religious belief. And if that really is her honest, sincere religious belief, then what she is doing is enshrining her religious belief in the law. That is not religious freedom. That is the opposite of religious freedom. Second thing, if God grants you your rights, why do you need a law for it? If God is with me, who's against me? Isn't that how that works? So I just thought that was kind of funny. Her own words kind of reveal what it is that we're talking about here. She's not really, we're on to it. We know, we see what's really happening. It's not about religious freedom. That's not a flaw. That's a feature, right? That's the goal, is to enshrine the religious beliefs into the law. And we've seen this happen before. We've seen this weaponization of this quote unquote religious freedom happen before. You've mentioned a couple of things already. Jason, we've seen I got this information from aclu.org. We've seen religiously affiliated schools firing women because they become pregnant. We've had stories about that on the nonprofits. Business owners refusing to provide insurance for contraceptives for their employees. We've talked about that on the nonprofits. Graduate students training to be social workers refusing to counsel gay people. Pharmacies turning away women looking for birth control. Bridal salons and reception halls closing their doors to same-sex couples while they're planning their weddings. We see this kind of thing, it seems like every day in the news. Stuff like this is coming up, and it's not new now either. Back in the 60s, we saw objections to laws requiring integration in restaurants because of the quote-unquote sincerely held beliefs that God wanted the races to be separate. Also around that time, religiously affiliated universities refusing to admit students who engaged in interracial dating, not even necessarily of their, because of the student's race, but because they were interacting with people of a different race. And so this is not new. There's a long track record, a long history of this type of abuse, of abusing this in the name of quote unquote religious freedom, pushing this religious dogma. In the aclu.org article that I was looking at here, they had a sentence at the end. It said, it was not about violating religious liberty. It was about ensuring fairness. And that's what we're pushing for. We're not against religious freedom. We're against I suppose I should speak for myself, but I think I know the three of you well enough that you'd probably be on board with that. It's not that we're against religious freedom. It's that we're against abuse of religious freedom in order to take the religious freedom away from others. It's not freedom for me and not for you. That kind of freedom doesn't exist. That's why we have the Constitution. That's why we protect each other's rights, to ensure fairness. It's the underdog that needs protection. The majority doesn't need protection. They can just vote in whatever laws they want. We have the Constitution to protect the minority groups, to protect the underdog, to make sure that rights are granted for everybody, not just for whoever happens to be holding the keys at that moment. Infidel, what are your thoughts on that?
After I hear time and again people talk about freedom and liberty and intertwining the word religion with them, sometimes I have to wonder what Bible they're reading, because I don't see freedom and liberty written in the Bible. I see authoritarianism. I see quite the opposite of liberty and freedom in the first place. So once you marry these two together and try to tie them into something, you've already polluted anything that can be claiming freedom, because it's quite the opposite. It's about control. It's about dominance. And it's about, for oftentimes, legitimizing personal hate. We've talked before about a guy on an airplane spewing his hate. This is what happens when we codify that hate, when we take that type of mentality and say, hey, because you are going to say that you found it in a book and this book is what your God gave us, it's okay. We're going to give you a buy. The truth is that most of the things that they want to cling to, they really can't even find a rationalization for that in their Bible. We talk about things like people making cakes, or people, haven't taken photos, or actually in that case, not even really taking photos, or not even really creating websites, but the illusion of their denial of a right to discriminate. They don't even have support for these things in their Bible. There's nothing in their Bible talking about making cakes or taking photos or building websites. So, not even in the New Revised Version. Forget the King James Version. But the truth is that this story and wanting to make this the law is just another example of them denying exactly what they say. This is 1984 recycled. War is peace, love is hate. Freedom is religion. No, Religion teaches quite the opposite of freedom. And until we recognize that, I think we're just going to see this get worse and worse and not better. Richard?
I'm going to go a little deeper into what I said in my opening statement a little bit, because this is the part that really gets in my guts. And, you know, I've been a lawyer for like 40 years, and I respect the law. I disagree with a lot of the stuff. Don't like the Supreme Court as it exists today. Not very good. But here's the thing that okay, you have these situations where you have somebody's belief, and you have, on the other side, you have actual people. And the court stands with the belief over the people, the belief that has no evidentiary basis. You couldn't convince any jury because there would be no evidence. Everything in the Bible is hearsay. There's nobody supporting that. There's no, you know, it's all myth. And yet the courts have gotten into this thing because of religion is, you know, sacred, that the belief, which is a mental thing for people, is supersedes the actual rights of individuals. And I just, you know, there was that case in Pennsylvania a few years ago where this gay couple wanted to adopt a child, and this Catholic organization wouldn't let them because they were gay. And so, you know, there was a lawsuit, and the court said, well, you know, it's their right to say no to them. There you have it. It's the belief, which is an ethereal thing. I mean, you can't even put your hands on it. And then there's these couple of people who want to have a child, and they lose to this mythological thing, which, as we all know, there's several thousand of those different things out there. There's been many thousands of them in the past that nobody believes in anymore, but the current ones still get credit. And just for everybody's benefit, if you want to take a deep dive into the legal side of this, probably a lot of you know who Andrew Seidel is. He's a very good constitutional lawyer. I know him personally. He wrote a book called The American Crusade. It's the second book he wrote. And the subtitle is How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom. They're turning it upside down. Instead of protecting people from having their religion taken away from them, they're giving power to religion to take things away from other people. And that's not what the founders wanted. That's not what it was all about. So, yeah, it's a scary situation that, I don't know, someday I'm going to run into one of those Supreme Court justices and ask them, how can you give rights to a belief over a person? It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, Jason, I guess I'm supposed to go back to Scott if I was told.
No, that's fine. I got a couple of questions I want to ask everyone. Yep, got some questions here. My first one, human beings are natural bigots, right? We can overcome bigotry, obviously, but we've been ingrained over years and years and generations of us versus them. We want to protect our own. We want to spread our genetic, fingerprint over the world, and we want to, keep resources on our side and not on their side. If we are able to squash this particular type of discriminatory tactic, won't something else just pop up in its place? And does that futility affect the way that we should approach this particular subject? And Fido, what are your thoughts? Is it a futile fight? And if it is, will that affect how we should proceed from here?
I would say quite the opposite. I say that it makes it that much more important that when we see it, that we shed that light upon that problem. Nothing ever gets better by overlooking or looking the other way. Exposure is the key, because yes, there'll be some other battle to fight. There'll be some other bigot come up with something else, and they'll be standing and wanting to die on that hill. And that, you're right, that is not going to go away. We are almost ingrained with this expectation of us versus them, and we feed into that so easily. And with that in mind, hammering it away, exposing it early and often, louder the better, not letting it stand, not going, oh, well, it's their sincerely held belief, as we've talked about before. This type of thing only gives credence to that type of mindset. And yes, hammer it away and get ready for the next one. It may be a game of whack-a-mole, but nobody ever benefited from us just looking the other way.
So vigilance, you're saying vigilance is what's needed here. Is that?
Nothing comes easy. If it's important to you, you need to stand for it and push back when people are promoting and trying to normalize their terrible and evil, bigoted ideas.
Definitely. Richard, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I just want to say that the premise of your question, I think, is a little bit cynical.
Okay.
If I thought there was no change hopeful, I'd just give up. But I don't believe that. I think what we need is to move toward what I would call Enlightenment 2.0. We need to move people into more skepticism, rational thought, logic, evidence-based beliefs, because that's when you have those kind of things, you don't run into these problems. Sure, you're going to still have some people who are going to be wackos, but if you have a basic societal norm of doing things based on the evidence and relating to people in a human way, I think we can get past that. And I think, frankly, that's the only way that this planet's going to survive, given the kind of weapons that exist now. We just need to get to a more, rational, evidence-based situation, and then we can get past these kind of bigotry. I mean, I know plenty of people who don't believe in us and them. I don't feel that way. Of course, I was very lucky. I was not indoctrinated, except for the generalized society stuff, what was on TV and stuff. But my family didn't, stuff any religion down my throat. So I've been kind of a passive atheist all my life, and then when I got older, I became more conscious about it. And then because of business stuff, I couldn't be too public about it because of the world we live in, And so, but now I'm semi-retired. I don't give a damn. I'm out here talking. I don't care. And I'm actually working on a book to deal with some of this stuff. So someday I'll share the rough drafts with you guys. But we've got to get past the primitive belief systems that are still hanging on from this 2,000-3,000 year old dogma that each cycle of children get raised up and pushed into it. Now, right here, we have a lot of people that happened to, but guess what? Because you had other influences in your life, because something caused you to think, because you went, that doesn't make any sense, because you're bright people and you care, your human came out and you said, hey, this is not the way to treat people. So there's something wrong with this organized religion. There's more of that happening these days. Younger people now are less biased racially and, sexually. And I think a lot of that's because they're seeing different things. I know when I grew up as a kid, I was lucky. When I grew up as a kid, there were almost no black people on TV. Okay. It was in the 40s and 50s, late 40s. I wasn't born in the early 40s. But I was lucky in the sense that I was a low income person and I lived in a mixed racial neighborhood. So I grew up going to school with black and brown kids, Asian kids, all through elementary, junior high, high school. And so, I didn't think I ever thought there was anything strange about anybody. They might eat different food than me and they might dress a little different, but they were in the same math class with me. They were in the same sports with me. You play on a team with somebody, you bond, like Jason said earlier about guys he has some differences with, but he spars with them and they're buddies. I mean, this is how we get past that. And that's one of the reasons why, this whole right-wing thing came about. Somebody earlier talked about it happened around Reagan. What else caused it to happen was Brown versus Board of Education. When all of a sudden they couldn't, keep themselves away from the other for schools. That was a big thing that started a right-wing movement. It was one of the major precipitators of it. So, we've got to get past that and see the humanity in everybody. And that's the other thing about why all these right-wing groups now, they don't want you to read books. They don't want you to know about African-American history. They don't want their kids to grow up realizing how ugly this country was because of what it did to certain people, because then they won't want to do it. They want them to not know this. Ignorance is bliss. That's in the Bible, more places than once. Anyway,
so
that's what
infidel talks about vigilance. Richard, you're talking more about relating with other people as people, right? Once you've recognized that people are people, then you know that it's really not us versus them. It's maybe just all us, right? Is that kind of what you're saying?
And developing a thinking premise that we look at stuff objectively with evidence, not on the basis of, quote, faith, or this is what I want it to be. I mean, imagine if a scientist, all they ever did was think about what they wanted it to be and jimmied their results so that they would come out that way. All the other scientists would laugh them out of the room.
So go figure.
That's what we've got to do with our
connection to the real world is important.
That's what we've got to do with our social relations. We've got to get those into that kind of rational functioning.
So Jason, what's your thoughts on that? Are we doomed to fail over and over again, or can reason triumph over biology, or do you disagree on the fact that we're fighting biology?
I do disagree on the fact, or not the fact. I disagree on the assumption that we're naturally bigoted. The reason people pack up and act the way we do is because we're primed to act the way we do. There's a fear of scarcity that we're taught. There's a fear that we're not going to have enough, and that so it's natural for people to group up, of course. But also what we're doing is we're being indoctrinated and we're being conditioned by those in power to treat the other person as competition. That's the problem. We are in an individualistic, quote, individualistic nation to where everybody is potential competition for job, for money, for resources. We don't have any. We do have a communal aspect. It's sad, but you actually see a very communal aspect within the Christian right, within Christian nationalism, and you see a lot of power gained from that communal aspect. I think the problem is the us versus them is a manufactured reality that we buy into, but it's also becomes a very actually real reality whenever you're competing for somebody for a job, and then that somebody happens to be an immigrant, or that somebody happens to be somebody who's an undocumented worker who is willing to take that job that you need to make at least $30 an hour on, is willing to take it for $22 an hour, thus lowering the bar of pay. And then, of course, who are you going to get mad at? That worker is going to get mad at that other worker. And I mean, but that's bred into this whole situation. Like capitalism pits one against the other. This whole issue is based on the fear of not having enough. It's based on the fact that people know that they're living paycheck to paycheck. So you have to compete against somebody you should be on the same team as. That's the biggest problem. I don't think bigotry is natural. Bigotry, it's the thing is, it's like you have issues with like facial recognition with different, quote, ethnicities and races. If you're not raised around them, you see that with people. You hear that trope. It's like, all people of this race look the same, all people of that race look. Well, that's because you're not naturally used to being around people of that mix. Most of my friends don't look like me. My kid, our gym, everybody we hang out with, our community, our neighborhood is very multiracial. I mean, Houston is one of the most ethnically diverse city, I think, in the world at this point. And we're happy about that. I'm really happy about that because my friend group and my family group and everything is extremely mixed ethnically and just in general in every way, shape, or form. So I don't know. I think the problem is a manufactured problem. I think the problem is that we're the working class and we don't realize that it is actually us versus them, the workers versus those at the very top of the hockey stick graph that everybody's seen whenever it comes to wealth inequality. I think that's the biggest problem. It's not that anybody is naturally bigoted. We're naturally tribalistic, but not naturally bigoted.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I predict that there will be some very interesting conversations in this area around a table with beers and at some point in the future. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity, hopefully at some point. I have one question that I want to ask you three, and this is kind of the capstone question for the evening. Okay. And the question is, Have we reached a point where we should start banning religions? Can we trust humans to resist pushing the envelope? We've had stories tonight where we see overstepping of bounds, pushing of the envelope, crossing the line. Can we trust people to not do that? Should we start banning religion? Infidel.
I'll answer your question just in one moment. But I wanted to say, Jason, you're absolutely right that this is a byproduct of a capitalistic society. This us versus them fighting over scraps. But as far as when it comes down to banning religion, that would make us as bad as them, if not worse. So, no, I would totally oppose the concept of banning religion. Now, I as I've joked before with people, I'm looking forward to the day that when we go to churches, that everywhere there's those little velvet ropes with the little brass stands, and we have some guy walking through with us going, and this is where they used to do this, and this is where they used to do that. Yep. And I really do feel that way, but we can't force that. That makes us just like them. So no, that's not only unrealistic, that's just as dangerous.
All right, Richard, what do you think? Is it
Yeah,
time
I
to cut
think
the cord?
it's well, let's put it this way. I think it's the kind of thing that has to sort of evolve away. And I think it has to be done by the stuff that we are doing here of educating people personally in our, walking down the street. I mean, if I get involved in a conversation with, I have a Freedom from Religious Foundation hat that I wear, and I go places and I do things and people look and I go, what does that mean? And it's great because it opens the topic because they're religious and they're going like, what are you? And I said, all it means is you can have your thing. Just don't try to shove it down my throat. And we get into a dialogue about that. What we need to do is start. I mean, I'm just going to, I don't mean to do this personally, but if I use myself as an example, I mean, if people are not indoctrinated with religion as they grow up and are taught about science and thinking and critical thinking and questioning, I don't think we would have religion. I mean, ask yourself this. If somebody came along tomorrow, say there was no Catholic Church, and somebody came along tomorrow and said, hey, I'm going to start this new organization, and this little cracker is this dead guy's body, and this wine is his blood, they'd think you were nuts and put you in a, padded cell.
Yep.
But because it was done back when people were too ignorant to understand how stupid that was, and then it became part of a culture that continues, it's cherished now, and people look at it, oh no, we can't change that. Children can change it if they are not brainwashed as they're growing up. And I honestly believe, other people say this, I thought this up myself years ago, that religious indoctrination is child abuse. Because you're teaching. What if you taught a kid that 5 and 5 was 8, and then they had to go off and try to deal with a math problem at school? They'd be screwed.
Right.
But we teach them that science doesn't mean anything. We teach them, that back then they teach them that the earth was flat, that this earth was the center of this giant universe. I mean, all of this crazy stuff that makes no sense at all. And even to this day, only about 45% of the people in this country think evolution is the right thing.
It's crazy.
I mean, but something, in Europe, it's very different. You go up to the Scandinavian countries, they all believe in evolution. And guess what? The latest, I just saw it today, the latest survey of who are happy people, we just dropped down from 18th into the 20s. And the Scandinavian countries are all right up there in the top 10, always. And they don't push religion. They have safety nets for people. It's a whole different way of looking at the world, as opposed to what you said here about this capitalist competitiveness where everybody's brought up, to try to take it from the other guy so he doesn't take it from you, as opposed to let's work together, and make it better for everybody.
I want to make sure we get a chance to hear from Jason on this. Jason, do you think that, I saw you shaking your head, so I think I know what you're going to say already. Do you think we should get rid of religion, or do you think Or do you think that's not the way to go?
I mean, yeah, of course we can't get rid of religion, but I think, I don't know, like the idea that there's a thing called a jury of my peers is terrifying, especially here in Texas, especially knowing what people believe. I just, and then the fact that there's people, and forgive me, I'm being kind of tongue in cheek, but I'm not. There's like people who vote, with what they believe the things that Richard was talking about, but yet they're voting and making decisions that change the course of my life, and then doing a thing on a jury that I'm just, the people of this country terrify me. And especially in my state in Texas, they terrify me. The decisions they make terrify me. The people who represent them fucking terrify me, because if you've got the most demonstrable fucking branch of science, evolution, literally like more demonstrable than like proofing you exist. I mean, it's so ridiculous.
Right,
and so much,
right.
all of our science is built around it. I worked in, and you have less than half of people believing it. What the fucking fuck? Right. I mean, it's hard not to be a fatalist, and it's hard not to just throw up your hands and say, fuck it. I mean, so of course people are going to want to go to the extreme and try to ban religion. But at that point, you're just being a fucking tyrant too. I mean, and maybe instead of banning religion, we should really call it out for what it is. If you perpetuate these beliefs, you're my enemy, and I mean, that may be a strong word, but you're legislating against my literal rights. You're legislating against my family. You're legislating against my neighbor, against taxpaying American citizens. You are my enemy, and you are a traitor to what this country should and does stand for, and what we're working towards for progress and well-being as a whole. And in my mind, there's no room for that. So it shouldn't be banned, but it needs to be fucking scolded, and it needs to be run out. And,
Right.
It needs to be run out of anything public. And we need to tax the fuck out of churches.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on that. I think, I'm a math teacher, right? It's not just about the answer, it's about the process. And I think jumping the gun and banning religion is the wrong way to go. It's reinforcing the wrong approach, the wrong, like Infidel said, we'd be doing the same, we'd be the same. Right. We'd become the beast we're trying to slay. Right. And so I think I would be happy if religion were not around. I believe that it's harmful and destructive, but, we want to do it the right way. We want to build a strong foundation and based on reason and thought and science and that kind of thing. But any awesome discussions tonight. I had a great time with all of you here. I want to thank all of you for joining me on the show tonight. And I want to say to everyone out there, if you want to get some cool ACA merch, visit our online store at tiny.cc/ACA merch. And if you want more nonprofits like you saw just now, click right here.